I got some questions.
That's how the stream starts. I've got some questions.
I've got some questions.
That's why we are here, I guess.
Like what's a sandbox? I don't even know. I feel like it's so many different things. I don't know how to get my code in there. I don't know how to get my code out of there. I don't know how to get my agent to work in there. I don't know what to do.
Okay.
Yeah,
Brad, that's bad because I invited you and Lau to explain to me, not the other way around.
This is supposed to be where like Lau is like, don't worry, I have the answers.
I got you. Well, the thing is, okay, well, we can start because there's like a way to start. Like, I mean, sandboxes. There's like a ton of providers for them, but I think where it really comes down to coding agent sandboxes. Do you remember in like, I'm gonna say December, November,
No.
right when the recent models came out, everybody was building their work tree tool, and I think that's actually a more fitting sort of a story, I guess, for how a lot of people use sandboxes for coding agents right now, which is you just want an isolated place where an agent can do its thing and then give you the outcome. So you you have your code files in a repo, and then you can run the agent directly on there, but then you're kind of stuck waiting on that agent, or if you do something else in the meantime, it all gets mixed up. So you copy that out, and then it does its thing on its own work tree elsewhere. So it's kind of a sandbox. It's a file system isolation. Obviously, it still runs on your machine. It can still wreck it if you run it with the wrong permission settings. But it's not in the same place where ostensibly you or other agents are operating in.
Right.
But then
I don't know if that answered my questions.
Huh?
But it's like, okay.
So that's the sandbox.
That's a sandbox.
Controversial statement.
Whoa.
Well, not really, but if you squint. But at least that's like in personal uses, like that's how often I think that's unless you're like really rigorous about them right now, personally, like that's how I use these sandboxes a lot. Is you want some sort of isolation so that it doesn't touch your thing while you're working on it, and it doesn't wreck your, like it's on a branch, it's on a different directory.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also other risk categories, which is network calls. Maybe you don't want it exfiltrating something or downloading something that could wreck your machine. So there's like a whole host of reasons why you wouldn't want to run agent on your machine directly.
Yeah.
And then that's when you reach for the more rigorous, I guess, isolation methods. Most harnesses now ship a sandbox.
Yep.
Currently.
Yep.
Which is not going to make this conversation easier because you have to. There's a sandbox inside of a harness, but then a sandbox outside of a harness. You can have a sandbox outside of a harness as well, and you need to make sure that you don't run both of them at the same time because things are going to get weird. And
so you could have a sandbox and a sandbox if you have both.
Yeah.
But there's definitely different types of sandboxes.
Yeah.
What I'm learning is that the term sandbox might be overly used, or perhaps have many, many meanings.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Look, I learned something. I feel more calm.
Nice. Let's end it here. Yeah, I started making a demo using extensions, but I'm not sure if I got it to the point where it's working because I was debugging some stuff. So instead, I made a TL draw. Well,
Yeah, I was gonna
Yeah.
ask. I was gonna ask if someone could start sketching some stuff. Do it.
let's. I'll share my screen and we can kind of work through this problem. All right. So this. Okay. So let's leave these words aside for now, but let's say you want to isolate the agent. So we talked about a few methods. One is, put it in a work tree. That gives you file system isolation. Generally, if you run an agent inside of there, if you run it in auto mode or in whatever sort of a default setting modes, it won't be able to go outside of it without your explicit permission. And this is also usually the Git, so VCS isolation. So it's on its own branch, and it's doing its thing. I'm going to propose we leave the sandboxes inside of a harness outside of this topic because that's the one that we have the least influence on.
Yeah.
And it's like harness providers do their thing. It's not exactly something that we can, just not that interesting.
But is there something you can turn them on and off in a harness?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
okay.
they'll usually, I think Claude has auto mode.
Even auto is different than sandbox, though.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, they
Actually,
have.
if you bump up or pop open the Claude Code docs, you might be able to. Maybe I'm wrong. I know it's not fun to watch Claude Code docs during our stream, but it'll have stuff. Because when we had a conversation yesterday about sandbox permissions or something, and I noticed that if I was in auto mode, but then I did /sandbox, it gave me a bunch of things to like. It was like, do you want auto in a sandbox or this or that? So yeah, because I think auto mode is like additional calls to their API to identify whether or not something is malicious.
Right.
Or,
yeah, it's sort of a pre-flight check, basically.
Yeah. So it costs more, but they like that.
Yeah.
They like it. We're sending more tokens over.
Nice.
I remember the last stream, Brad, you are very cost sensitive. The last time we also talked about the super review or something like that.
Ultra review.
You were also worried about the tokens and the cost.
Well, I tried running an ultra review last night, and then surprise, API overloaded, and it quit after 2 minutes. Part of me was like, okay. Did this eat into my usage? I don't know. Yeah. It was, But okay, so we got sandbox and a harness, but we're not going to talk about that.
Yeah, we have work tree that is at this point, I think, simple enough to sort of leave it aside because it's one of the things where like, okay, you've decided you're gonna use sandboxes. Like you don't feel confident about just running your agent on your machine or on a remote machine. You want to sort of put them. And I think there's a few reasons why you want to do this. So one is security. That's obviously like the top of the mind. So that's both like preserving any existing so that it doesn't wreck something and brick the machine, or that it doesn't exfiltrate something that it shouldn't. But I would argue there's like other things, which is parallelization is why you'd want to run this. And I guess to some extent, like checkpoints, these are different, but like you can, depending on what you're building, if you're using sandboxes, depending on which sandboxes, you might spin up 5 different versions of your app and have 5 different agents work on them at the same time on one machine without them clashing over ports, without them clashing over dependencies, things like that. Checkpoints is also maybe on more complex things where if you have a system and a VM, at any given point, most sandbox providers have some sort of a checkpoint that an agent can use to branch off. So if you've done a considerable amount of work, you don't want the next iteration to redo it all before it branches off. You might sort of take that full state of the machine and just continue from there. But this, like, the interesting problem is that all of these are, all of the sandboxes are mostly stateful things. And there's a lot of trade-offs that because like stateful meaning you don't, it's not that you just care about the output, but there's multiple things that happen in that sandbox that you want to preserve. You want to maybe take the code. So like, with a work tree, it's a branch. You made the code changes. Now you want to integrate them back. Maybe you're not that interested about the code, but maybe you're interested about the learning, some other outputs like, a markdown file or something. Still, how do you exfiltrate that out of the sandbox? Or exfiltrate is the wrong word. But
I mean, it's the right word. It just sounds malicious.
Yeah. Or it's, a whole session like that is useful on its own, or like there's so many different things that can be useful, and we haven't even getting started with like the state of the machine, the like whatever it is. Like that's what makes these things hard, is because all of the, I would say, hardness about it is like you are dealing with a stateful machine. You can't just be like, okay, this is going to be a sort of a serverless style, just in and out, and you're done, because there's a lot of stuff you care about.
Yeah, so I can tack on to the parallelization. For our main application that we develop, which is the desktop application for FP, that is a Mac, or it's an Electron app, and in dev mode. Okay, so typically if Claude or Codex is going to touch it at all, I have a setup with Agent Browser that can communicate with the dev version over Chrome Developer Protocol, Chrome Debugging Protocol, and like take snapshots, look at the DOM, etc. So that has to run on a dev server locally, and it also has to run as a native app. And so it basically makes it so that, like, in order to have that iteration loop with like hot reloading and stuff like that, if the agent is tweaking things in the UI, it needs to have a dev server, like the dev version of the native app running, and you can't do that with multiple, because it gets very confused if there's multiple running. And I don't even think it's possible with ours. The workaround is to like always build the binary and then launch that binary as a separate app. But then typically Claude might get confused by other running binaries if there's other ones that are around. And it makes the iteration loop a lot slower. So one of the ways I've been interested in Sandboxes, since it's an Electron app, we could, last week I got it to run inside Linux. We're not releasing a Linux version, but if you're super interested, hit us up and maybe I could give you a build. But yeah, so if I wanted any sort of parallel work on one of my machines on the desktop app, I would have to isolate them somehow, some way. And that to me is like a reason to try some form of a sandbox that is more than just a work tree.
Yeah.
So
a good question, or like I think a question that anyone comes up with. Like the moment you start working with sandboxes, and I'm sure you have the same, is the like pet versus cattle metaphor, which I pulled up here. And this comes back to that like stateful problem, which is, do I treat this machine as a pet? Meaning it's a long-lived, maybe frozen and restored VM that activates on input and maybe starts a new session, but all of that, it sort of builds up information over time, and it's long-lived.
It's like you're never clearing it.
Yeah, you're never clearing it. You're never destroying it and restarting it, or like that is a significantly destructive action. Yeah. Versus cattle, which is you're creating and restoring these all the time. I haven't quite found. I found that like in workflows that I'm sort of starting to put together, I'm finding the need for both. Pet, I think the most like if you've done any kind of OpenClaw, whether it's isolated in a sandbox or it's just running on a different machine, like that is the definition of pet. Like everybody, OpenClaw has gotten massive. Everybody has a pet sandbox right now. I hope they're running OpenClaw on a different machine. Cattle is where it becomes tricky, because now all of that state you need to think of how to store outside, because these machines can be spun up or spun down, and you can't rely on them being something that they store sessions with. How, I don't know, Brett, what's your been a experience with these two?
I take a heavy pet approach. Even like 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago when we talked about tmux, cmux, like even my work trees are not really ephemeral. Like I have pre-named work trees. I don't like a new name and a new work tree for everything. And that's because there is so much state with like config, meaning like envars or any number of things that I just don't like the hassle of having to copy that over to every single new work tree, even though there are like utilities and ways to do that appropriately. Cattle wise, I have not found a use for cattle necessarily, but I guess what I'm describing with the testing flow, or like wanting a verification loop on the desktop app for a specific bout of work, that's a bit more cattle. But yeah. That's the whole thing with cattle is it's just like way more to think about.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily like a fun engineering challenge for me.
It's one of those things where once you get in there, it's like, okay, now where am I, what's the process of getting the diff from this change out into my main machine or things?
Yeah, so the things that come to mind are like, if it is ephemeral or cattle, then you need to think of, okay, so how does it get a copy of my code base? And there's a lot of strategies for that. And then what is it like? How do I get its changes back?
Yeah.
And then also, how do I authenticate my coding agent inside of the cattle? And what kind of cattle is it? I guess.
Yeah.
I guess the what kind of cattle is it still applies to pet as well, but
yeah. You do this once manually and you're done. I would note that most what we've seen software factory setups do lean on this quite often, as obviously like the moment you go sort of to scale, that's the that's where you're basically left with okay, now I need to figure out how to organize a bunch of VMs for a bunch of developers to use at the same time, and that becomes a lot more difficult. Okay. What have we not covered yet? Any other thoughts?
We covered it all. I guess so. Like, there's what are the different types of sandboxes? I don't know if we want to go into like providers as well. I think Cursor, I haven't looked into it, but Cursor released an SDK yesterday. That's Sandboxy, but a bit more like we handled all of the complexity of cattle. That's how I would characterize it. Or we gave you an SDK that helps you manage all the complexity of cattle more easily. That could be an interesting reference point. But Nela, you got any lingering thoughts?
Well, you were saying not talking about providers, but is there any sandbox provider you normally go for? Like, do you have a go-to?
Do we have a go-to? Thing is, I have that's the tricky thing. Technically, it's kind of sandbox. Like, I have 2 remote machines, so those are kind of my sandboxes. Like, functionally speaking, right now those are my sandboxes. So that helps me. I have my laptop, 2 remote machines, and
so you kind of solve this problem with hardware instead of more software.
The most expensive way possible. But like now I'm getting to the point where on those machines, I do want sandboxing, and I don't necessarily know what I'm going to reach for. If it's local, it's going to be some shape of Docker. However, Lau has also looked into like Mac VMs and running those locally. So I don't know. I still don't know where I'm going to land.
Yeah, I'm also between. So I have a VPS using a remote Mac. That's often because we are developing a desktop app. Like one of those things is virtualization is hard with Macs specifically. Maybe now that we have a Linux build that we will not share with anyone else outside, only for our own development.
Only with our agents, and possibly if you're nice and you DM me.
I had a good use case yesterday where I was specifically using sandboxes, but I was using it in the most. So I guess, I mean, that's another thing is like there's containers, microVMs, VMs, there's like different layers and depending on what you need. I was basically testing our new onboarding flow for FP. And the whole conversation I drove through Claude, but I had it set up a testing environment with some basic Docker containers that I ran locally. And in each, I would have a Claude and Pi that was set up with GPT 5.5. And I ran 10 testing sessions as sort of a quasi-eval a little bit, where I pasted the initial prompt of, hey, help me set up with fp.dev. And then the idea was like we put a lot of information in the CLI itself, so that the moment an agent starts using the CLI, it's getting a lot of information of like, oh yeah, by the way, tip, check out FB guide, that, and it can sort of progress further. And I just had it run 10 simulated sessions, all running in Docker containers over Tmux. So the orchestrator could respond. So it was kind of an agent talking to an agent. But basically, the agents inside of containers could be encountering FP fresh and sort of taking the user through it. Meanwhile, the orchestrator was told to emulate a human user, basically a sort of a profile dev. Is not meant to as like a super serious, I don't know, human simulation or whatever. It was meant more like if I give this like just a bare bones prompt, hey, install FP and have it run, and I run that 10 times, how many of those times does the agent go off the rails? The good news was it didn't in any of them. It was successful at managing, but this is one of those things that I mentioned with parallelization. I want that actually might be like a good separate thing to that as like a little bit of a benefit is the problem of agents is the moment you start using a fresh session, it's kind of like you're onboarding a very competent but a new colleague every time. Sometimes that's useful if you're testing some flows that you might not have encountered, or like you might have too much state on your machine already right now that would influence that. Because there's some things that we do only when we know that we've run FP on a fresh machine, and a sandbox is a quick way to just get a fresh machine, install your tool on it, and see how does it work on there. So that was what I was using a container for. I also sometimes have experimented with a tool called xc.dev. That is let me actually pull it up on the screen.
One of my favorite onboardings of all time, I would say, because
ssh.xc.dev. And then I think it's a nice way that they combine both the pet and cattle. Like by default, it's a pet, like it is a VM, but then every VM can spin up other VMs. So you can like have one agent running there, and then it sort of fans out into multiple if you need. There's also sprites, I think, from Fly, built in a similar fashion. The one I'm experimenting with right now with our own extensions is a local one, because these two were remote, but is a thing called Gondolin. So where is it? Hope you can see. Yes. It has a very, very nice TypeScript API, which works with our TypeScript extensions. So you can quickly spin up these local, I think they're QEMU based microVMs. This is the demo that I was preparing that was not quite working. But that's in progress.
All right. What did we learn?
A lot. I learned a lot today. I haven't heard about the pet and cattle, but it makes sense. So I learned those differences. What have you learned, Brad?
Oh, I'm going to be honest. I actually did not understand the difference between pet and cattle either. Like I intuitively understood what a pet was, but I didn't really know. Cattle to me sounded like lots of pets. So I think I also that is a point of clarity for me as well. Gondolin, I had not actually seen that before. I don't know. And then otherwise, I just generally eased my anxiety around what our sandbox is for. Yeah.
Yeah. I think next
right.
week we can't do a stream, right? So you both will be gone. But maybe we are back afterwards, I guess. Maybe I'm streaming alone. I will see. But maybe there will be a break as well. We will find out.
Nella is going to live code her own sandboxing startup.
What?
Stay tuned. She's going to use Sandboxes to build a sandbox startup.
Oh.
Build your own sandbox provider on top of bare metal.
We should do sandboxes on sandboxes. How to sandbox your sandbox. Yeah. Don't think about it too hard.
No. Better not. But yeah, I mean, I think that's cool. Let's see what you bring for news when you come back from San Francisco. I think there will be some new stuff on your minds. So I'm looking forward already for in 2 weeks. And next week there will be a surprise or there will be no stream. So we will find out.
Stay tuned.
All right. Bye.